There are 6 veterans who could be in big trouble during draft weekend. We'll tell you who they are next.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Magdziuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. And on today's show, we're going to take a look at 6 veterans who could be in big trouble this weekend when it comes to the draft and their dynasty value. And Kate, I want to start with Chris Olave. So Olave had a really rough 2024 season for a variety of reasons, but why might he be in trouble this weekend?
Here's the thing. It seems like there's some growing speculation. Now, I think the most popular sort of positional pick for the Saints to this point has been the quarterback position. We got the report about Derek Carr, the fact that he might not be available in the 2025 season due to a severe shoulder injury. That report came out, and suddenly the buzz around the quarterback position started picking up. But Marcus, it seems like there's some growing steam that they could be in the market for a wide receiver. And what do you know? Tetairoa McMillan, wide receiver, is conveniently in the range that they are picking at number 9. So what do you think about some of the conjecture that, I don't know, maybe Chris Olave is going to be splitting more targets here should they draft a wide receiver as high as 9?
Well, doesn't it make sense? You look at this receiver core, and it's Brandon Cooks, who, he's going into year, I think, 11 now. It's Chris Olave, who had multiple concussions last year, and Rashid Shaheed coming off a torn ACL. Like, they clearly need more weapons. And if they're not going to draft a quarterback at 9, and that's the growing belief in NFL circles, they need to get someone that can help in the passing game. Now, maybe that's a tight end. There's a chance that it's Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland. But I'm looking at that receiver core, and what do Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Brandon Cooks all have in common? They're tiny. Like, they're just small receivers. And I think they could really benefit from a big X receiver. And Kellen Moore, the new head coach there, has almost had an X receiver wherever he's gone, whether it's been at the Cowboys, Eagles last year with A.J. Brown, and even with the Chargers when he had Mike Williams. So I would not be surprised if the Saints are drafting a offensive playmaker in round 1, and that just makes Chris Olave a lot less appealing.
It does make Chris Olave a lot less appealing because let's be real. There has not been a ton of target competition there in New Orleans to begin with. Chris Olave has been a tremendous. I want to preface this conversation that I'm about to have with the fact that I think Chris Olave is a fantastic NFL wide receiver. Just saying, but. He had 138 targets in his second season, 2023. That amounted to just over 1,100 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. Like, we haven't yet seen the upside for fantasy that we'd like to with Chris Olave, and that's with him, seeing a pretty decent target share here. So yep. What does that amount to, and how does that affect the upside even further when you cut that target share? And, you're not going to be going to him for 50-50 balls, right? Like, that's not what his role in this respective offense would be. That would kind of shift to, the Tetairoa McMillan, the big-bodied X receiver. Like, they'd play very different roles, but when it comes down to it, targets are targets. And if you're going to see fewer of them, that limits your upside for fantasy. And what has already been kind of a low ceiling, especially given the fact that they don't have an answer at quarterback right now.
Yeah, and we should also mention that's a big part of it. If they're not drafting a quarterback at 9, it means they're probably waiting until round 2 to grab one, and maybe that's the Jalen Milroe or the Jackson Dart or Tyler Shuck. And I don't think those options should encourage you at all if you have Chris Olave, who is currently wide receiver 24 in the latest batch of ADP from Dynasty League Football. If you're a Chris Olave dynasty manager, I think you're worried. I think you're hoping they go somewhere else. They address their offensive line, they address their defensive line, but a wide receiver in round 1 would be a pretty massive hit to his value. I think if that happens, Kate, we're now talking about Chris Olave down in the wide receiver 34, wide receiver 35 range rather than wide receiver 24.
Yeah, and that's not even really baking into consideration the fact that, this is a player that's had a pretty concerning injury history as far as concussions go.
Yeah.
That's a big part of his average draft position being wide receiver 24 at this point. So, yeah, I think all of these concerns are fairly fair.
Yeah, fairly fair. Let's talk about another receiver that I think will lose value over the weekend. And that's Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy was top 6 in receiving yards last year, had a fantastic season with the Browns, but it sure seems like Travis Hunter is going to be the pick at number 2. And Kate, it sure seems like Travis Hunter is going to spend the majority of his time on offense. I saw a report from Daniel Jeremiah over at NFL.com saying that the expectation is that Travis Hunter is going to major on offense and minor on defense. And that's bad news if you're a Jerry Jeudy dynasty manager.
For sure. And again, even, the fact that he ranked as highly as he did in the receiving yard aspect, he still wasn't, a game changer for fantasy, or at least he hasn't been to this point. This was his 5th NFL season. Even if you're excited about the yardage, and I do think there were some circumstances like the fact that he was playing, with a quarterback more willing to throw the ball, the fact they didn't have to play with Deshaun Watson the back half of the season, I think those things played into his favor. We don't know what the quarterback position is going to look like. How often do we truly believe in the 5th year breakout? I don't know. Because there were a few, the end of year totals, 1,229 receiving yards is great, but there were a lot of bumps and bruises to get there.
Sure.
You had some really big spike weeks, 142 receiving yards and a score, 235 receiving yards and a score, 108 receiving yards, but then 25, 27, 16, 35, 18,
we should mention a lot of that was the big spike weeks were with Jameis Winston at quarterbacks,
yes.
right? And the ones that were down were where it was Bailey Zappi and Dorian
Yep.
Thompson-Robinson and the rest of those characters at quarterback. Obviously, the quarterback is a concern because I just don't know. I know they don't have a quarterback on their roster that I think can support 2 receivers, Travis Hunter and Jerry Jeudy, and a tight end that we really like in David Njoku. Someone's going to get squeezed, and I've got to believe it's Jerry Jeudy. I'm not saying that you should knock him a bunch because I think he's already devalued a little bit at wide receiver 36, but I wouldn't be surprised once the Travis Hunter pick happens if we start to see his ADP sliding past guys like Chris Godwin and Khalil Shakir and Michael Pittman, more down to the wide receiver 40 range.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's tough for Jeudy because I think he had a really good year, and I do think he's a good player. There's no doubt in my mind that Jerry Jeudy is a good player, but if you add Travis Hunter, Cedric Tillman coming back from an injury, I just wonder if this passing offense is going to be a little bit more balanced than it was a year ago.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, let's talk about some running backs and a wide receiver, a former first-round pick at receiver that could get dealt over the weekend. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. And with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's one of the reasons why I use Game Time. I love the all-in pricing, which means there's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. And their last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater events near you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're talking about 6 veterans who could be in trouble this weekend. And Kate, let's talk about Detroit Lions wide receiver Jameson Williams. There was a report from Albert Breer on Monday that some teams around the league think that Jameson Williams could be available via trade. He was a first-round pick in the 2022 draft, I believe. Do you think, first of all, do you think he gets moved?
I wouldn't be surprised if he did, especially given the fact that we did see a little bit of a breakout season from him in 2024. Because you look at the Lions and you say, okay, if Jameson Williams is not necessarily going to get that second contract, which, I mean,
I don't think he will.
I don't think
it's been too rough, right?
Yes, like you had the suspension, you had there's a lot of different components there that I think have made this a less smooth transition. So if he's not necessarily a part of your long-term plans, it might just be more conducive to getting some of that draft capital back before you get him back onto the field, risk injury, risk what have you. I think that's kind of the move for me, is seeing what else you could get in return. But is this a great draft to do that with? I don't know.
Probably not. But I do wonder if Jameson Williams just isn't a Dan Campbell guy. Like when we think of Dan Campbell players, we think of like tough, reliable, consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not Jameson Williams at all. Like he is really good at his role, but there's just so much inconsistency. And we saw that in the playoff game last year against Washington. I wonder if the Lions are looking at it like, hey, if we can trade him for, let's say it's a 3rd-round pick. I'm just making this up. A 3rd-round pick. And then in round 1, we take someone like Emeka Egbuka, who's not a perfect fit, but he blocks, he plays hard, he can play multiple positions, and he's just the type of guy we want around. Maybe they feel like that's a better trade-off for them.
Yeah, I think we're at a point of inflection. I think your point about maybe him not being a Dan Campbell guy is the best point you've made to this point in the conversation.
Wide receiver 30 right now in Dynasty leagues. I would also mention, I think there's a chance, Kate, maybe they don't trade him, but they still draft a receiver relatively high because of the inconsistencies. And if they're adding just another weapon to that passing attack, I get really concerned. I've already had some concerns about Jameson Williams at wide receiver 30 and what that would look like moving forward. You look at some of the other names that are going behind him: Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden, Mike Evans, George Pickens. I think this could be a rough weekend for him.
I think that's fair. And again, 17.3 yards per reception. That's fabulous. But you look at the difference in target share, right? 91 targets compared to Amon-Ra St. Brown, 141. You take away any sort of level of that efficiency, he doesn't necessarily have that target share to support, or, he might not have enough targets to kind of make up for any loss in efficiency. 17.3 yards per reception is a great average. What do you do then if you do trade him and you put him on another offense? Like, unless he is going to be a guy that can get over the 100+ target mark on a consistent basis, he's not. Where does that leave you?
Yeah. So if you can move him now before the draft, I think that's a smart move. But you only have a couple days to do it. Another player I wanted to talk about, Kate, is a running back, Brian Robinson, who's currently RB29. And actually, I think that's a pretty fair price. He's a 26-year-old running back on a really good offense. Not a lot of competition right now, but we talked about this on yesterday's show. I won't be surprised if Washington uses their 1st-round pick on a running back this year because they're really trying to go for it. That's why they made the move for Deebo Samuel. They brought back Zach Ertz. They paid Bobby Wagner. I think they're trying to win right now. I wouldn't be surprised if Washington is aggressive trying to add another offensive playmaker during the draft.
Yeah, and you look at, some of their pre-draft visits, whether it be Senior Bowl meetings, whether it be pro day meetings, whether it be, having, like top 30 visits, like they've done their due diligence and plenty of research at the quarter or at the running back position between, players being kind of projected as high as like Omarion Hampton, Trevion Henderson, like some of these guys were projecting to go a bit earlier. They had a formal meeting with Ashton Jeanty at the combine, team pro day meeting. They met with Caleb Johnson, Quinshon Judkins. Like they did their due diligence, and they also, even, did a fair bit of work on some of the mid-round guys like the Cam Scadaboos and Bayshal Tutins. Like
But just to be clear, even those running backs would concern me if I'm a Brian Robinson dynasty manager, because you add in someone like Tutin. Tutin's ability is as a basically wide zone runner where you want to get him out in space. And I think his speed is just totally different than what Brian Robinson has. And now you're taking touches away from him. Or Cam Scadaboo would be a very similar type of player that might be able to get some goal line work. I think any running back inside the top 4 rounds would be devastating to Brian Robinson's dynasty value.
And the thing about Brian Robinson's dynasty value is it's not hinging on the talent. He's not necessarily like an otherworldly talent. It's really been kind of an opportunity game for Brian Robinson. And when you consider adding in another name into the mix, I don't think his role in the offense has been diverse enough from like a 3-down skill set standpoint. They don't utilize him a ton in the passing game. Like there are legitimate reasons to be concerned that this value is not going to remain stable if they add a running back in the top 4 rounds. And all signs point to, yes, they're drafting a running back at some point.
Now, if you're the Brian Robinson manager, you're hoping it's much later than it is earlier. I think Trevion Henderson would be a great fit because he can be somebody that can play on all 3 downs. What you're hoping for is that it's somebody like Damian Martinez on day 3, or Jordan James, one of these guys that we like, but maybe isn't a threat to come in and replace him right away. And maybe it's just a clear backup to Brian Robinson. But my fear is they want to get somebody who can complement Robinson. And I just don't have all that much interest in Brian Robinson, the complementary running back.
Yeah, especially given the fact that, we still have Austin Eckler in the mix here. Like there's just not enough meat on the bone. And this is already a tenuous situation. You have a rushing quarterback who isn't necessarily going to utilize the running backs in the passing game quite as often as like a dump off option.
Nope.
It's tenuous.
Yeah. Let's talk about 2 more running backs that I think could be in big trouble this weekend, including one running back that might see their team draft a running back inside the top 5 picks. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? You can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6. It's as easy as you stream your favorite TV shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. And with 4K streaming, you can watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Head over to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. That is Fire TV Locked On, all one word, to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, and Fire TV Cube. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, find the Locked On NFL Mock Draft Show, available now on Locked On NFL Draft. Go inside the Locked On War Room for all 32 picks in this ultimate 7-episode series. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft, available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Kate, let's talk about some more running backs. Tank Bigsby. Sounds like there's some rumors that the Jacksonville Jaguars could potentially draft Ashton Jeanty at number 5. We started hearing these from Todd McShay, started hearing it from Brian Broaddus. It sure sounds like the Jaguars are considering drafting Ashton Jeanty with their top pick.
My question is, do we think this is pre-draft fodder? Or do we think this is, one of those circumstances where, I don't know, you're talking up this possibility that you're going to swoop in? The Raiders have been kind of that lock for Ashton Jeanty in terms of pre-draft narratives. Like, is this a moment where we're looking at smoke and mirrors? Or do you actually think there's a good chance they select Ashton Jeanty 5? Because I'm leaning more toward pre-draft fodder.
It's interesting to hear so many NFL insiders and usually reliable sources think that, yeah, Jacksonville's considering it. And part of me gets it. Like, after Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Cam Ward, there's a big drop off in talent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most people agree that Ashton Jeanty is the 4th best player in this class at worst, right? And if you're sitting at 5, would you rather have Jeanty, who's so clearly the best player, or take another player at a more valuable position, but somebody that you have lower on your board? My gut tells me that Jacksonville's not going to do this. And what they're trying to do is drum up interest, so a team will come up and trade to 5, jumping ahead of the Raiders to get him. Having said that, Kate, having said that, I do see a scenario where it's like, hey, let's just give Trevor Lawrence as many weapons as possible. We have Brian Robinson and Ashton Jeanty together. We at least have a pretty good foundation for a run game or for an offense.
It is. Yeah, it would definitely be a good foundation for an offense. Now, I've talked a lot about the potential fit of like a Tyler Warren and who's more of a weapon, not necessarily just a tight end, right? Like adding some sort of element that I think even extends beyond the run game, because Tank Bigsby had a pretty awesome second season, a pretty underrated campaign considering the fact that after year 1, finished 132 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Nobody was overly impressed, but took a big leap forward in terms of workload, averaged 10.5 rush attempts per game this past season. 49.4% rushing success rate per Pro Football Reference. As a backup, just under 800 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns. Like, I think he did enough for them to at least be curious. And I do think that there's enough depth in this class that, like, if you're not sold, the options on the board probably in the early second round are going to be still high quality options that are probably what you're going to consider an upgrade over your current rushing room. So, like,
we should also mention Travis Etienne is still there. And he's actually being drafted higher, RB27, but it just feels, you and I have kind of been out on Travis Etienne for a while. We've been riding the Tank Bigsby train. I would assume if Ashton Jeanty is the pick at 5, that Etienne gets dealt at some point during the draft, because there's just no way. There's no way that they're going to want to pay Etienne that money and have Tank Bigsby and then have Ashton Jeanty on the roster. I just don't see the vision. Okay,
so then let's talk like third degree of removal here. If Ashton Jeanty goes, Travis Etienne gets dealt what are the best landing spots for his value? Because if you do think he's moving on, you think he's going to get a fresh start, then maybe like, is he a value at RB27? Former first round pick
No.
who, no?
No, probably not, because what he's going to get dealt for like a late day 3 pick. And
Okay.
that team's just going to not have that much investment in him. I think whatever team trades for him isn't trading for him to be their like day 1
RB1.
starter. They're trading for him to be like part of a committee. And that's basically the exact same situation he is in now, but he's on a team that drafted him in the first round, right?
Yeah.
So I have a hard time believing that ETN's going to gain value in a trade unless he goes to a team that just completely whiffed on running backs in the first 2 days of the draft, like the Cowboys or the Steelers. That's the only hope there.
Okay, that's fair. Now let's talk finally about Chase Brown, running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have done their homework at the running back position as well. I feel like you're in one of two camps when it comes to your evaluation of Chase Brown at this point. Either you believe that he is a true workhorse running back, and what we saw at the back half of last year wasn't just a circumstance of convenience that Zach Moss had this season-ending injury and he had to bear the workload, or you believe that that's the running back that Chase Brown is. And I'm more of the belief that like his play style, though he's a bigger running back because he plays with like that speed, explosive element, I think he's a really good complementary back, much in the same way that I view like Jalen Warren in that bash. Like sometimes giving them, running backs 20 plus carries isn't the best way to get the highest quality play out of them. And that's kind of my thought for Chase Brown. What do you think?
RB13, by the way, RB13,
RB13.
which is crazy because the Bengals are going to draft a running back. It's just a matter of where, not if. And this feels very similar to the Brian Robinson discussion. Is if you're a Chase Brown dynasty manager, you're hoping it's a day 3 pick, right? But if it's Quinshon Judkins or Caleb Johnson or Dylan Sampson, now we're getting concerned because now it feels like we're back to a full-time committee, and that's just not what we want.
Definitely not what we want, and especially for a player that's being valued as highly as Chase Brown is. Like,
Yep.
There are just a few running backs in this group that I'm looking at, and again, Chase Brown, one of them, Tyrone Tracy, another one. Like some of these players that I just don't think there's any way that they emerge from this draft unscathed in any way. Like
I think like Najee Harris is one. Like I would be shocked if the Chargers didn't draft a running back in the mid rounds to give them some more athleticism. There are a lot of these running backs from RB12 to RB30 that could be in real trouble this weekend.
Yeah, and that's what the magic of the NFL draft is all about.
That's why we love it so much. It's going to be a wild, wild weekend. All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. On Wednesday's show, Matt Williamson will be here. We'll be talking about all the latest draft rumors and buzz as we get closer to Thursday night. Make sure you're following Kate at Kate Magdziuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.